The dark legacy of Jim Spence and the UDA in Northern Ireland. Jim Spence was born in the early 1960s in the Woodvale neighborhood of Belfast, Northern Ireland. This was a period when the city was on the brink of a conflict that would last for decades and would come to define an entire generation. This struggle, which was known as the Troubles, opposed Unionist loyalists who were determined to maintain Northern Ireland inside the United Kingdom against Irish nationalist Republicans who wanted to merge Northern Ireland with the Republic of Ireland. Having been born into a family that was of the Protestant faith and belonged to the working class on the Shankill Road, Spence had the opportunity to grow up in one of the most staunchly loyalist districts in Belfast. His perspective on the world was influenced at a young age by the environment, which was characterized by the presence of murals that glorified loyalist fighters, flags bearing the Union Jack, and a profound lack of confidence in Catholic neighbors. The Shankill Road was more than just a place to live. It was also a stronghold of ideology, a location where allegiance to the British monarch was considered to be synonymous with identity, belonging, and survival. The profound economic difficulties and a dearth of opportunities that beset many Protestant congregations that were composed of working-class individuals only served to intensify emotions of alienation and hatred. Growing up meant not only experiencing the economic instability of post-war Northern Ireland, but also going through the experience of witnessing firsthand the regular riots, army patrols, and sectarian fights that gripped their streets. This was the case for young men like Jim Spence. Around the time when he was entering his adolescent years in the 1970s, the conflict became increasingly intense. Bombings, killings, and street violence were all carried out by Republican and Loyalist groups, which led to an increase in the level of paramilitary activity. At the same time as it served as a protective shield for many Protestant adolescents, the Ulster Defence Association, UDA, also served as a violent expression of their identity. In 1971, the Ulster Defence Association, UDA, was established with the intention of protecting Protestant areas from the brutality of the Republican government. However, it swiftly gained a reputation for its own campaigns of intimidation and terror, primarily directed against the Catholic and nationalist people. During this time of upheaval, Spence was convinced to join the Ulster Defence Association, UDA. He started engaging in paramilitary action in the early 1980s, and he was motivated to do so by a combination of ideological devotion and the harsh realities of sectarian fighting. Not only was the UDA involved in politically motivated violence, but it was also involved in organized crime, including extortion, racketeering, and drug trafficking. By that time, the Northern Ireland Democratic Alliance had become the largest loyalist paramilitary force in Northern Ireland. It gave a sense of purpose and structure to a large number of young men who had few options available to them, and Spence moved up the ranks of the organization quite fast. As the 1980s came to a close, Spence had established himself as a prominent player within the West Belfast Brigade of the UDA, eventually rising to the position of commanding B Company. As a result of his leadership, the organization earned a reputation for being extremely efficient and merciless, particularly in its search for individual and intensification of rivalries between the various brigades and commanders. Johnny Adair, a more violent and power-hungry character within the West Belfast Brigade, was gaining more and more prominence, which posed a direct challenge to Spence's leadership. Adair, who was supported by younger and more militant elements, began to establish his influence over the other, which led to an increase in tensions between the two. During the Stevens Inquiry, which was an examination launched by the British government into allegations of cooperation between security personnel and loyalist paramilitaries, Spence was taken into custody in the year 1992. Even though he was eventually released without any charges being brought against him, his arrest undermined his standing inside the UDA at a time when allegiance within the organization was beginning to fracture. At the start of the millennium, Spence had been kicked out of the Ulster Defence Association, UDA, on the grounds that he had betrayed the organization and had reportedly aligned himself with competing factions. The faction of the Loyalist movement that was more structured and disciplined suffered a huge blow as a result of his fall from favor, which paved the way for more chaotic leadership under characters like Adair. According to the Loyalist community, Spence became something of a pariah once he was kicked out of the organization. His name and legacy continue to be influential, particularly among older Loyalists who remembered his ascent to power during the height of the Troubles. Although he no longer possessed official influence, his legacy and name continued to matter. Spence was lured into renewed conflict during the early 2000s, particularly in the midst of feuds between the Ulster Democratic Alliance (UDA) and the Ulster Volunteer Force (UVF) in North Belfast. This was despite the fact that Spence had made efforts to depart from the world of paramilitary organizations. These feuds, which were frequently ignited by power battles over territory and illicit profits, were a reflection of the ongoing instability that existed within Loyalist ranks, even after the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 was implemented. However, despite the fact that the peace process had brought a stop to widespread armed combat, a large number of paramilitary groups continued to operate in the shadows and continued to exert influence over their respective areas. Spence progressively disappeared from the public eye throughout the course of the years that followed. Despite the fact that he periodically gave interviews or made remarks in which he defended his acts in the past, he preferred to stay out of the spotlight. His reasons, which stated that his violent actions had been in service of a larger effort to safeguard Unionist and Protestant ideals, were received with criticism from nationalists as well as moderate voices within his own community. Controversy continued to surround his history, particularly his relationship to Troubles, a time period that continues to throw a long shadow over the communal memory of Northern Ireland, is inextricably linked to his life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.